Konyo Pula. We celebrate today a teenage girl. She was probably born around the year 270, and she died in the year 289. This was a teenage girl who, especially in those days, even though she came from a wealthy family, really had no power at all, really had no kind of agency over her whole life. And yet, she ends up doing what entire armies could not do. The Roman emperor at that time, Diocletian, he was able to impose his will on entire nations, entire empires through the force of his army. He could bend them to his will. But this teenage girl, he could not. He could not defeat her. She defeated him. She was from Nicomedia, which is a city near Constantinople, born of, like I said, a wealthy family who are actually Christians. Her father was named Dorotheos, which means gift of God, and her mother was Eusebia, which means piety, reverence. Her parents were barren and childless, but they prayed to God to be given a child. And as the psalmist says, the just cried, and the Lord heard them and delivered them out of all their troubles. And so they had this girl, and they raised her, as St. Paul says, in the education and admonition of the Lord. They raised her in the faith. And when it came time for her to be betrothed, which was probably the most important part of her life as the daughter of a wealthy and noble family, a magistrate asked her parents for her hand, and she refused. She said, "Why do you want to give me over to the anxieties and cares of this world, to the things that pass away?" She wanted to devote herself entirely to Christ. Last night in Vespers, what we call the doxastikon, at the end of the kind of feature hymn, at the end of the Lord I've Cried at the beginning of Vespers, there's this beautiful hymn comparing her to the wise virgins who attend on Christ the bridegroom. And it says, holding her lamp with exultant joy, she shouts to him, Christ, "I have run toward you and toward the smell of your ointments, O Christ God, for I am wounded by your love." She was wounded by her love for him, and she ran toward him as one thoroughly in love and who knew no other. And so, like the other 12 million martyrs in the first 300 years of Christianity, she ended up giving her life. Why? Because first she refused to marry the magistrate. For this, the magistrate turned in her parents and denounced them as Christians. They and St. Kyriaki were put through various trials before various local governors before finally reaching the emperor. She was threatened. She was offered gifts and more wealth, and she refused them all. She defeated the emperor himself with a single word, ohi, no. She would not compromise. She had drawn a line in the sand because all they were asking her to do was to worship the pagan gods. Give a little bit of incense, throw a little bit of incense before the statue of the idols, and all this can be yours. You can avoid torture and death, and not only that, you can be given even greater wealth and ease in this life, position, status. That's all she had to do. Just compromise just a little. They probably knew that she could go worship her Christian God in private. But before everyone else, they just offer a little bit of incense to the pagan gods. And she said, no. No to compromise. No. She drew a line in the sand, and she would not cross that line. And she paid for it with her life. That is character. That is strength. That is a model for us. That is what we are celebrating today. But the question for us is, we're not likely to be confronted with such a stark choice between life and death, between pagan gods and worshiping Christ. No, the dilemma that confronts us are much smaller compromises with a lot more gray in between. So we're not asked to offer a little incense to the statue of a pagan god, but we are asked to offer a little incense to what we really worship: money, pleasure. These are the new pagan gods. And so, while we're not threatened with death, we are threatened with maybe discomfort socially, maybe some impediment to our advance in our careers. Maybe even it's as simple as our children. When it comes to our children, we want them to have a good life. We want them to socialize. We want them to be accepted by others. They join the baseball team, the soccer team, the football team, and they say, it's just a little practice on Sunday morning. We just need a little practice on Sunday morning. We just there's a really important game, and the only time supposedly that we can schedule it is Sunday morning. That's our dilemma. That's our confrontation. And the question is, are we going to compromise just a little? Or will we be like St. Kyriaki? Will we draw a line in the sand? Will we say, this is right, this is wrong, and I'm saying no. No! I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I'm not compromising what is clearly the commandment of the Lord. On Sunday morning, I'm supposed to be in church. So I say no. If you do it any other time, we'll be there, we'll be glad to participate. But on Sunday morning, the answer is no, period. This is a line in the sand that we can draw, but it's so much more difficult. It's so much more insidious, the temptations. We live in a supposedly Christianized society, so it's not as stark, the contrast, the decisions that we make every day, whether to deny Christ or to be faithful to him. But it is in these small things. And it's so easy to go along to get along. Just go along to get along. Just offer a little bit of incense to the pagan idol. Just a little bit. Things will be so much easier for you. But St. Kyriaki comes today to remind us to say no. No. That even a teenage girl can stand up to the emperor himself and say no. And while she may suffer a little in this temporal life, she enjoys eternal repose with her heart's true desire, her heart's true love, Christ our God. Amen.